Okay, hey, I just want to do a quick video to show the desktop editing tools in Modbox. And then after that, I'll make another video. I'll turn on VR and do a video on the VR tools. So to start, I'll go Build New. I'll select this Blank Basics template. And when I select the template and start a new creation that way, it starts with a few default mods. So first I'll go into mods and turn on a few more, maybe just extra primitives and drones. Okay, so I'm in the desktop editor right now, and that's the default when I'm using a keyboard or mouse. But otherwise, if I'm using a gamepad, I default to the desktop editor closed in edit mode, and I can use the tools, just like I would if I was in VR or if I was playing. So I can go tools and then voxel tool, and these are the same tools that are an option while playing the game, if the creation allows for that. Okay, but I'll go back to the desktop editor. So the desktop editor is very much like Unity or other tools like that. We tried to simplify it a lot by just having sort of one sidebar rather than all these docking windows and weird layouts. There's one sidebar on the left side and a right sidebar that you can open and close with the hierarchy and other options. So in the left sidebar you select a desktop window that you're currently editing, and in the right sidebar you can also select some of the same desktop windows. So first thing I'll do, I'm in Entity Assets. I'll add some primitives to the level. I'll just drag them in. I can do something like go into Quick Create mode to quickly add a bunch of them. I'll turn that off though. I'll add a cylinder, and then when I have an entity selected, I can select the gizmo of how I'm going to edit it. So the default is just drag, so I can just easily drag it around and move with it. Or I could select move to more precisely move it, scale to bring up these scale gizmos, and then rotate to rotate in the world. And then there's a lot of other options up top, above that. So with move, I can switch between global space and local, which is all very much just like how Unity works. There are a lot of other these editors, same sort of options. But with Modbox, it's a few ways to move these around that is different than that. Like if I place in a cube and drag it, I can then turn on gravity and have it fall. If gravity is on, physics is also on. I can also just turn on physics by itself, so it collides against stuff while I'm moving around. That way I can precisely fit it. And there's some rotate options and snap to grid. So I'll show snap to grid next. Maybe I'll change the default material to concrete, just because that looks slightly better in this creation. So I'll turn on snap to grid, and I'll place a cube. And right now, the snap to grid is set to 0.5. Let's go 0.25 just to, there we go. And so all the primitives are designed to be snapped into the same grid. So even when I'm scaling it, I can have it precisely sort of fit in. And it shows me the current value while I'm scaling it. So let's go 3. And make that a little bit longer, and then I can add in a ramp, rotate that a bit, have it reach the end, and then scale it on this side too. And then let's move it so it's like that. There we go. And I can select that and then duplicate it. And yeah, a small simple ramp. Okay, so one of the main differences with Modbox compared to a lot of other level design, level editors and game engines is that rather than set up a usual hierarchy to define, say, physics and how things are connected, you actually just connect them in edit mode. So if I place this cylinder, I can place it there and it shows me that it's connected to that object. And I'll do it the same for the other side like that. So when I have it selected, it shows me what it's connected to. And so because of that, when I go to play mode, these are all one physics body now. I don't need to deal with the usual hierarchy where I place them all. Usually in Unity or something like that, you would place them all under a body. You'd define the body. You'd have to set the mass and the center of gravity and all this stuff. But here I can just show that they're connected. And then I can turn that off by setting off this auto connect option. So if I have auto connect off, it won't connect to that body there, and it'll stay as its own rigid body, as its own physics body. So the great thing about doing connections that way is it allows for things to be dynamic and change in the world. Like I can, just as a quick example, I'll duplicate this, put it on the other side, and now I have a ramp like that is connected to one another. So maybe I'll put this in the center just for symmetry purposes. Okay, and I'll turn on auto connect once again. So now when I go to play mode, I can, these should all move as one body. I'll turn on drag again. But I can do something like delete this one and delete this one, and now they are apart. So it allows for dynamically destroying parts of it. So I'll add another cube and having it piece together as new physics bodies because it's set up as connections. Okay, I'll add another cube like that. And then it knows to just fall down, and this becomes the last body, the last physics body. Okay, just to show a few more options you have when dragging in entities. I have this angle on placing, which sets how it should position the thing that I'm placing. So by default, this is on, and then whatever I'm placing will angle itself based on the surface that I'm placing it on. I can turn that off though, and then it'll stay upright. But I'll turn that back on. I'll add a few joints to this structure, and then I can edit the joint. I can select the joints and see what they're connected to. So they're connected to each other, and then when I go into play mode, they form a joint against one another. I'll just remove this center one. Okay. So another option is this scale to grid size. So if I want to actually sort of place new entities and have them place them on the grid, but say maybe be smaller. So I could go, it's 0.25 right now. Let's go 0.05, which would be pretty small. But, oh wait, I gotta actually turn that on, scale to new grid size. So I can place cylinder, I'll go to quick create mode, and I can quickly add these very tiny cylinder ones. In fact, actually, maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger. I'll go 0.1. Or actually, maybe back to 0.5. There we go. Like that. So it scales it down to 0.25 scale, and I can quickly then add them, and they'll fit on the grid. I'll turn off quick create mode and select these again. So to go into some of the other desktop windows, I'll go into edit entity and select an entity like this one, and I can change its properties here. So here I can set its precise start position and its scale, and whether it's static in a world or not. So if it's static, it'll make the entire body not move. So I could just turn on this one, set it as static, which will also set it there. And when I go to play mode now, this whole body will then be static. I can't move this body unless I disconnect it from its part, and now from the static part, and now I can move the body. Okay. So this has physics. It defaults to concrete, and its physics material is concrete, and it has the physics sound, and then it's set to so these primitive parts always have a material set that actually just sets its drawing, which I can set when I'm dragging them in. So right now I have concrete as the default. I can set that to plastic, and then when I'm dragging it in, it defaults it to plastic. Okay, so I'll delete that. And just to keep going through some of the desktop windows, World Options just has a few options to browse. Version history lets me see what was edited over time and undo and redo. I can go into mods and enable more mods. Asset screen kind of it lets me browse all the assets that I've loaded from all the mods. So I can go to Sky Environments and see all my Sky options. I can go into the AI scripts and see what scripts that I have in mods. Or I could go into the core and a material and see some of the materials. And just to quickly try this out, I could clone a new one, go grass, new, and then I have a new material, grass material. I can edit that, change some of its shader properties, like its color. There. And then world settings just lets me set a few settings in the world, like gravity. Right now I have this post effects on for cartoon day. I can turn that off to make things look a little bit worse, but I'll turn that back on. Cartoon day, and I can set how much I want the post effects to take shape with its weight. So gravity defaults to 1, and I can set the ground here too. So turn on ground, which isn't really needed in a voxel creation, but I can turn that back on, and then set its. I can add a wall to the creation and set the wall height, and set the wall material, something like plastic, which looks terrible. Okay. Or I could add water to add a water plane and set the water height. But I'll remove that ground. I can also change the environment here completely to another voxel level. But I'll go into audio to set audio track. Game has a few game rules and options. VR just has some VR specific settings. Voxel terrain lets me set some of the voxel properties, like change the material and turn on and off smooth edges on it. But I'll go into sky. So in sky I can set precise lighting and lighting options for the environment. I can make the sun more intense or turn the sun off. I'll go back to 1 though. I can set the sun color to blue. Again, that looks terrible though. And I can set the sun angle and how it looks. And then I can also add fog. So let's go fog and distance 20, just to show how quickly the fog can go. Okay, I'll go back to 1000. And then game managers are things coded in MP script that sets the game rules. So this will be different for every creation, but in this creation it has just a few options, like to set if there is respawning and to set some of the default UI elements. And then I can go into material painting to quickly just paint materials on objects. So I can make all these grass or wood. And then another option here is the color painting. So if I want to color stuff, let's go. And with the coloring tool, it's good to establish a palette. So like after you select a color, you can add it to your palette, and you can keep using that throughout the creation. Something better than this terrible pink color. But I'll just go back to white. And what I can do too is use this to remove the color tool. So just remove all coloring. And then there's the voxel sculptor tool, which lets me sculpt. I have sculpt mode, which is kind of just, it keeps it a cursor, and this is exactly like how the VR tool works, the same sort of options. So there's sculpt mode, which is a cursor in the air that I can then set its distance of how far I want to sculpt away from the camera. And then there's surface mode, which is it hits the nearest surface and sculpts on there. And I can go to what are the other options? Block is a way to just quickly place blocks of voxels. And then coloring is if I want to just color it and not change, not actually add or remove voxels, but only color. But I can go surface and then remove and start removing the voxels in subtract, I mean. And I can select the paint only. So if I wanted to add a different material, this terrain island, which probably won't fit very well, and it does not, but I can paint new materials on there like that in paint only mode. So one thing I could do also is just generate entirely new terrain. So I'll go generate new. Let's go flat and see how that looks. Yeah, just a completely new terrain. I'll do that again. Okay, and then I have the mesh editing window where I can go into it and then select the primitive that I want to mesh edit. So I have to select a primitive that can be mesh edited first, so not every entity can, but all the primitives can. So I'll select this cube and then hit edit mesh. So it starts in vertex mode, but I can go to face mode to select what I want to move. I can scale it up and down. I can extrude it to make a new face. And then I could go to edge mode to select an edge I want to move. So this is kind of a basic mesh editing used for level design. So rather than doing very precise sort of, you wouldn't model a whole human character here, but it's good for doing uh, quick primitive mesh editing to work with the level and to do things how you want to do physically. But I'll stop editing, and then just to show the hierarchy a bit on the other side. So if you open the other window, you have all the same options as, well, mostly the same options as this other side. There's a few that are just on the right side, like the hierarchy, where you can, just like Unity, you can just view every entity in the level. I can even select myself, my own player, and as I move around. And this is a way to just quickly say select a bunch of stuff and delete it. I can go into search entities if I want to say find every entity. If I want to search based on certain parameters, like search based on distance, I just want to see the entities that are close to me, or if I want to see entities that have a certain component or have a certain tag, it's just a way to filter the hierarchy into certain searches. There's a side view to be able to precisely place things. So if you need to see a different perspective, rather than the camera setup and different layouts of Unity, we kind of went for just having the side view option. And then I can see game logs to see any errors or information from the last time I played. Keyboard shortcuts just lists some of the keyboard shortcuts that you have access to depending on the tools that are open. And yeah, that's pretty much it. Okay, so I went back to the creation how it was before I destroyed it. So just to show a few of the other options, I'll turn off some of this. And I'll start showing the prefab system. So one thing I could do is I could select all these entities and create a group, which pretty much just groups them all together so they're all childs of a single entity. So I created a group, and now I can move that all at once. So in the hierarchy, you can see that it's a group and then all the children under it. So now when I select it, I can move them all at once, and then if I select it inside again, it selects stuff inside the group. So I select outside of it, it selects just the main group, and then all the children inside of it. And then if it's a group, I can easily copy and paste it. So one thing I'll do is instead of grouping it, I could create a prefab out of that group, but just to show, I'll ungroup it first and select these entities again. Okay, so I'll create a prefab of it, and a prefab is exactly what it is in Unity. Like Modbox has its own prefab system, but it's pretty much the same idea, where you take all these different objects and you create a new object out of that, and then use that as a template to create new stuff. So I'll move these right here, and I'll create a new prefab, and I'll call this structure. Okay, so now that I have this structure, I can then add more of this same structure all over the place. So just like in Unity, I can then make changes and apply those changes to these structures. So where am I going to do this? Okay, I'll just do this right here. So I'll place this again, and I can, in this structure, I'll close this hierarchy because I don't need it. I'll edit these two pillars, and I'll go set material. Let's change it to plastic. So now that those materials are plastic, I can select this entity again, and in its prefab window, because this is a prefab, it's a prefab instance, I can see in its main component which prefab it's using, this structure asset, which I created, I can go to prefab and apply changes to the prefab. So this would mean apply what I did to it, and it applies it to all the saved versions. I mean all the versions of it in the world. So I'll go apply changes to prefab, and then it updated all those entities. And now when I create a new one, it'll be with the red pillars. So also, you can create prefabs out of other prefabs. So you can have as many levels you want of different prefabs. So I'll clone this one. I'll make another one beside it. I'll delete these guys. And then I can select these two things and create a prefab of both of them. So create new prefab, two structures. Okay, so now I have a prefab that's actually two structures. I can place that, and then they're now together. So this is where to build, say, easily giant creations that are reusable parts. Okay, so I have those two structures, and now if I say do a change, say if I want to have just the right side cube, make this change. So I can see in the hierarchy of these three structures, I'll edit this one, this cylinder, and I'll say I want that to be, let's be grass, I guess. So grass rather than. So what I could do is I could apply this change to this structure and then apply it to all of them, all that prefab, or I could apply it to this top one. So I'll go apply changes prefab asset, and it just changed the green part of the other entities there, rather than each part of it, each cylinder. And I'll delete those. Okay, so one of the final things I'll show in the desktop editor is this hierarchy mode, which is just like in Unity prefab mode. It's called hierarchy mode because you can do it not only in prefabs, but I'll place that back there, and I'll enter hierarchy mode on this one. I'll select this, and then there's this hierarchy mode option. And now whatever I'm doing it inside this prefab. So if I'm setting the material, I now just select the material on inside this prefab. So I'll go, let's go wood. So I'll turn that wood and that one. And then when I'm placing entities, they get placed inside the prefab. So let's add a button to the top here, a tiny button. A few of them, I guess, and a breaker for some reason. Okay, so now that when I exit hierarchy mode, it'll give me the option to apply the changes that I made. And I'll apply to all, and then I'll create those same entities and do those same changes on this one. So it's just a way to go into this prefab and then start adding entities and making changes and easily apply those changes to all the other prefabs in the world. And everything that I'm showing here can also be done in VR with hierarchy mode and placing entities and applying changes and all that. So I think that's it for the desktop editor. I could get into the UI editing, but I think that's its own video or tutorial. Yeah, and then there will be another tutorial on scripting, and I think that's it. So yeah.